Hello everyone and welcome to this latest Brexit webinar from the BIA. My name's Steve Bates and I'm joined today by Tim Windle, our Strategic Policy Advisor. Morning, Tim.
Morning. And we've got a fairly packed agenda for you today. Never a dull moment in Brexit land. So we're starting off with latest news. We're diving into the UK Internal Market Bill, what it is and what it means and what some of the implications might be. Looking at trade negotiations and how they're progressing. A little bit on the Court of Justice of the EU and some of the implications and news that we've seen in the past week or so, and then other news. And then we're looking at 100 days to go, so the timeline, some of the uncertainty that remains, trader readiness for the 1st of January, a specific piece on the MRA, and then more broadly supporting the sector after Brexit. So,
Thanks.
Go ahead.
So we like to do polls and questions during this, and this is really a loosener. It's just for fun. There is no track and trace on this, but we thought the question that I've been asked the most by members is this one, so we thought we'd ask it back to you. Have you ever broken the law in a specific and limited way? This is it's just for fun. It's just to get you used to using the system. How are we feeling this morning? We can't vote, unfortunately. A bit like Prince Harry, if you saw him yesterday saying he couldn't vote in American elections. I don't get the vote in this one, not because I'm an ex-royal, but just because that's the way the system works. So just to get your fingers going, let's see where you are on this one. And as I say, it's the question that's been on the lips of many BIA members since the publication of the Internal Market Bill. Have we got some figures on that one, Tim?
Yeah, we've got a couple more coming in. I'll just give it another 3 seconds. So vote if you haven't. And closing the poll.
Let's see, are we law abiding in the BIA? Can you give us the results?
Oh, are you able to bring the results up, Marzia? I'm not sure I'm...
Oh, look at that, down the middle. I think we will draw a veil over that and see where we're going as we go forward. Thank you for that. A couple more serious ones coming.
So moving on and focusing on the latest news. The first is a bit of a fixture in our Brexit webinars. How much time is left? So the 100-day clock started yesterday, and so we're looking at the different animals or mammals that you might be able to breed in the amount of time we've got left. So the first one here, very cute, perhaps not very familiar. So we have an adult there for you, which is a little bit more obvious. That's a chinchilla. And then a lion cub, or perhaps a lion king, and something a little bit more pop culture reference. We have a tiger cub, and there's a tiger king holding it.
Great stuff. Cute animals, Tim. So 99 days to go. We've still got some animals. We will be down to insects soon, as we said, but it shows the brief period of time till the actual end of transition. And of course, the other question that we ask in series, and it's a time again more serious question as we go forward. Next slide, please.
Yeah. So, do you think the UK and the EU will agree a free trade agreement before the 31st of December 2020? And this is a question where. Oh.
So hopefully the poll can open.
Oh, I think I was about to click launch, and it had already launched, so I ended up closing it. I don't know if there's a way to bring this one back, unfortunately. Not off to an inauspicious start. Let's
move on. Remind people of the results last time, and I'm sorry we can't give you it this series. So people were getting slightly more sceptical through March to September. We will ask this again, and apologies for fat fingers on this one. We won't tell anybody in America that we've been unable to run a poll. Keep going.
Brilliant. So moving straight on to the UK Internal Market Bill as promised. So here's a couple of headlines that you might remember. Firstly, Jonathan Jones, the top government lawyer or permanent secretary at the government legal department, resigned just ahead of this bill being published. And shortly afterwards, the Northern Ireland secretary admitted that the bill will break international law in a very specific and limited way, which relates to our first question. And last week the bill passed its second reading in the Commons. It's going through Parliament now, and there may be some further changes to the bill. There's been one already which will allow Parliament to vote before any powers are used which may break international law. It should conclude in the House of Commons by the end of this month and enter the Lords in early October. where it may face some more difficulty, but we'll talk a little bit more about that at the time. So moving on to the next poll, Steve.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the serious point on the bill, rather than the obviously the aspects of the bill are important, and we'll go into those in detail. But I'm keen to take the temperature of the sector as to how the experience of the last couple of weeks, or the headlines of the last couple of weeks, and the way in which it's been handled helps you or hinders you in business terms. So I hope this makes sense. Has the way in which the UK government presented this bill increased or decreased certainty and confidence for your business? This is obviously a conversation I've had with many members, but I'm interested to get the view of a large section of the BIA's membership and broader than that into the sector.
So about half of you voted so far. If we could get a few more votes in, or anyone else who wants to vote on this question, that would be great. Has the way in which the UK government presented this bill increased or decreased certainty and confidence for your business? I'll give it another 5 seconds. And we're closing the poll.
Wow, that's I don't think we've had one as one-way as that for a long time, Tim. So 93% say this has decreased your certainty and confidence for your business, despite there being a law coming through Parliament, and 7% say it's increased. So that's quite interesting. Shall we dive into a little bit as to what this internal markets bill means, Tim? And you've been following it closely.
Yeah, so basically this provides a UK single market, and you might remember the white paper from July. It suggested this is being introduced due to the need to provide a single market underpinning for the UK market will prevent unnecessary barriers and new costs for businesses and consumers. So definitely playing up the benefits of single markets. It guarantees unhindered trades and common regulatory standards, which is quite good for our sector, given we don't want individual regulators for each of the devolved nations in the UK. The key principles that it brings forward are mutual recognition. So this is that if a good is sold in one part of the UK, or made in one part of the UK, then it must be able to be sold in all other parts of the UK. So a Scottish business, for example, producing and selling goods that were illegal to produce in Wales could still be sold by that Scottish big business in Wales. The second is slightly different. This is non-discrimination or unfettered access. And this ensures that regulation in one part of the UK does not discriminate against goods from another part of the UK. So, for example, we know Harris Tweed is produced in Scotland. England would not be able to bring in a law that said all Harris Tweed had to be sold out of fridges or something ridiculous like that, because it would discriminate, or all Tweed would have to be sold out of fridges because it would discriminate specifically against one brand. And the Scottish company, Harris, would be able to bring a complaint against the UK government to get that overturned.
So I think you can see that's why we think this is broadly a very, very helpful bill, and much of the substance within it we would fully support, particularly in the sense that maintaining a UK-wide regulator and all of these things are good for business, despite what we've seen about it. So we've been broadly supportive of the bill, despite how it's been introduced.
There's been quite a bit of internal reaction. So the Scottish government have called the UK Internal Market Bill an assault on devolution, and has recommended the Scottish Parliament withhold their consent from the bill. Wales Council General has labelled the bill a power grab. So there is this thing, the Sewell Convention, which means that the UK Parliament does not usually pass legislation that impacts on devolved competencies without the consent of the devolved legislatures. So it can't pass laws that affect Scotland and Wales without their permission. However, it's only a convention, so it's not legally binding. And the government is suggesting that it doesn't feel it needs to give the devolved legislatures authority to vote this down. So I think there's a storm brewing there, and we'll see what ends up happening.
Good stuff.
And then moving on, so for the whole of the UK, so the bill makes clear that goods moving from GB to NI must still meet EU requirements. The key controversies it brings forward, the first is waiving export summary declarations from Northern Ireland to Great Britain for qualifying goods. So export summary declarations need to be filled out under EU customs rules, and technically because goods leaving Northern Ireland would be leaving the EU customs area, they should apply in this case. How much the EU might care about goods moving to NI to GB in terms of the wider picture of a deal is uncertain, but this would make it easier for Northern Ireland firms to move goods to the rest of the UK. And we're still waiting for a definition of exactly what qualifying goods means and includes in the bill. The second is setting out state aid rules in Northern Ireland. So the Northern Ireland Protocol applies EU state aid law to any UK act affecting trade between Northern Ireland and the EU. And the UK is concerned that this will tie the whole of the UK to the EU state aid rules. So what the bill is introducing is a mechanism that allows ministers to determine how that state aid law is applied without the EU's oversight, which potentially breaks the withdrawal agreement. I say potentially because you could argue that this breaks the withdrawal agreement. Specifically, Article 4 suggests that neither side should do anything that undermines the withdrawal agreement. But what the UK government might point to is Article 6 of the UK internal market Northern Ireland Protocol, which suggests that the UK should be able to take measures to protect the UK internal market. So it's gearing up for a sort of legal battle because potentially there's a little bit of confusion between these two articles. This is different than a normal trade agreement. With a normal trade agreement, say between America and Europe, if there's a breach, there's normally a mechanism to raise a dispute, and then the country that may be in breach to return into line, or for the whole trade agreement to drop. In the case of the Northern Ireland border and the withdrawal agreement, the Northern Ireland Protocol, obviously there's a mechanism there that both sides have agreed to try and protect the Good Friday Agreement. So what that introduces are specific arbitration mechanisms to ensure both sides stay in line and protect the Good Friday Agreement. Some of those arbitration mechanisms could see the Court of Justice of the European Union issuing fines, and there's a question around whether the UK would agree by any arbitration ruling or pay any fines. But if they do not pay fines, then the withdrawal agreement also allows for any other sanctions on any other agreement between the UK and Europe. So it would allow Europe to potentially do something, for example, on financial services access to the European market. And you could see a point, hopefully adult and cool heads would prevail, where you end up in a sort of vengeful reciprocal situation that potentially risks the Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland border and the Good Friday Agreement.
Tim, I think you've done a great job there in explaining what is a very complex bill very, very quickly. I mean, I think what's interesting is that we're seeing now that some of the tensions within the withdrawal agreement are now being brought into the limelight by the way that the UK government has interpreted and put measures before Parliament, and they've put that into a bill which I think from a business perspective we think is largely sensible and maintains a decent degree of access and unity within the UK market. But I think it's important that we understand not only that this is a evolving picture going through Parliament at the moment, but also it then sits this into an international context. And as you've explained it there, what's interesting is how this has been interpreted by other players, and that's what I'm going to take us through in the next couple of slides. So I think if you look at the European Union position, next slide, we've had the position from Vice President Sefcovic, excuse my pronunciation there, and the interpretation there is that the withdrawal agreement contains a number of mechanisms and legal remedies to address violations of the legal obligations contained in the text, which the European Union will not be shy in using, and that suggests that they are considering going to up the ante as a result of this. Obviously, that's not exhibited itself yet, and they're still talking and negotiating, but who knows? And violating the terms of the withdrawal agreement would break international law, undermine trust, and put at risk the ongoing future relationship and negotiations. The reason why we're spending time on this is I think it puts a context as to whether you think there's going to be a deal or no deal, and where we might be and what we might be if this has queered the pitch or fouled the water in the negotiations. Then it may be more difficult. And I think it has implications beyond the EU UK. For those of you who take a global perspective, if you look at the perspective from the US, for example, President Trump's Northern Ireland envoy has made calls that the Good Friday peace process must be preserved, and Nancy Pelosi here, the Speaker in the House, has been very clear that if the UK violates its international agreement, Brexit undermines Good Friday Agreement, there'll be absolutely no chance of the US-UK trade agreement being passed in Congress. So it's not simply that the sector is exhibited by you're concerned about it, but other international partners are concerned about it. And I think we'll see where it goes, but the passage of this bill has obviously been pretty fraught and has had an impact already in the negotiation positions. But perhaps I think what's even more interesting this month, Tim, is how that then puts the UK's position with regards to its direction of travel as global Britain, and where we might see this in terms of different parts of the world and negotiating trade agreements.
Absolutely. So so you can see there the European flag, and I think everyone would agree that a trade agreement with Europe is our #1 priority. They represent 47% of our trade. But in terms of trains, I think you could argue that the trade agreement with Europe has yet to leave the depot, but there are certainly a lot of people still waiting for it. The next priority you would assume would be America, which would be 15% of our trade. I think, again, you can argue that the train is waiting at the station right now because the election is going on and a lot of things have been paused as a result. But there's quite a big tree or blockage on the tracks, which is the UK Internal Market Bill and what that might mean for the Good Friday Agreement. And then conversely, and potentially one of our lower priorities is Japan, which is 2% of our trade. And we've, in the past week or so, managed to agree a free trade agreement with Japan, although the document itself has yet to be published. And so we've got a picture of a Japanese bullet train here, just showing just how speedy that deal has been.
Thank you. I like it's my fault that I got Tim to do a torturous train analogy, but I think it is so thank you. But I think it is interesting if you think about it. The one that is going it seems to be going fast is perhaps a smaller percentage of our trade. We've always prioritised and asked for a European deal and a US deal, but it is interesting to see. And if you think about the implications of this, and this is really where my mind is thinking, and go to the next slide. If you look at the UK positioning, I think the Department of Trade are interested in heading towards partnership or joining the CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, and have issued this update on UK possibly acceding to this. So if it is Japan first, and this may have been a priority of all the way along, perhaps we should think about whether that is where the UK is most likely to be in 2021. What does this mean for our sector if we are, in a sense, in a Pacific style arrangement, with the rules being more like in the trading arrangements and the opportunities being more like akin between Japan and Australia than we've expected between the UK and the EU. Perhaps one of the driving factors here is you do the deals that you can do in the world of trade, and if these are the ones that the UK can get done, then perhaps we need to be calibrated around those. And I'm interested in hearing from members about whether there are particular advantages or particular issues, IP, rules of origin, some of the technical stuff that sits in these deals that may be of import for our sector in these areas. I think what was interesting was there was very little talk of life sciences or our sector in the press releases that surrounded the Japan deal. Obviously, Japanese companies are significantly investing into UK life sciences, so that's good to see continuity for them. But I'm interested in hearing more from members if this is a direction of travel that we need to be aware of. And I think that takes us to our next poll.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, the next poll question: do you feel the announcement of the free trade agreement with Japan is a positive step for your business? And if I just launch the poll now. So obviously Japan is this is the first announcement. We haven't seen the documentation yet, and I think it's interesting how a lot of these trade agreements actually interact, because I think certain countries that we're also agreeing agreements with will be interested to see what's in this, and also what might be coming out of future agreements, in case there's anything we're conceding to certain other countries that they may want themselves. So this is perhaps the first in a long step, but obviously what we'd have liked to see first is the European trade agreement. So just over half of you have voted again. If I give it another 5 or 6 seconds, the question again, do you feel the announcement of the free trade agreement with Japan is a positive step for your business? Closing the poll now and sharing the poll.
Well, pretty clearly 2/3, 1/3, which is great. Thank you very much. Really useful to see. I think, as you say, as you can see, that's great news, and we'll continue to share more of it as we see the detail. And I'll also feed this back to Dick that was the thinking from our community. So that's great. Thank you very much.
So moving on from trade, we thought this was interesting. So you may have seen, I think just over a week ago, a letter from the Chief Secretary to the Treasury to the European Scrutiny Committee suggesting that the jurisdiction of the EU Court over R&D programmes like Horizon Europe is not a breach of the government's red line, which would suggest that the UK would be happy to remain a member of Horizon Europe or a part of it. However, in response to the UK Internal Market Bill, a lead MEP warned that the UK may be excluded from Horizon Europe because of our likelihood to breach international agreements. A couple of members asked questions around what this decision on Horizon Europe and the jurisdiction of the Court of Justice of the EU might mean for the Unitary Patent Court, which I think is a lot more interesting to many of us. I think our view is still that the UK is unlikely to be involved in the Unitary Patent Court, particularly from this quote from the government suggesting participating in a court that applies EU law bound by the CJEU is inconsistent with our aims of becoming an independent self-governing nation. And I think this is the distinction between the Court of Justice of the EU's power over UK law and being able to change it or not. So the jurisdiction over Horizon Europe is likely to be disputes about funding, whereas the Unitary Patent Court could have implications for the future of patent law in the UK itself, which probably is crossing that government red line. So this is perhaps giving us a little bit more clarity about what the government might be willing to accept and not accept in terms of EU power or jurisdiction over decisions and that kind of thing.
Tim, thank you for clearing up the fact that, in a sense, you've got what feels like the UK government accepting a remit of EU law in one area and not in another area that's both important for our sector. And I think you've neatly put the line down the middle there, which is about ability to affect UK law seems to be the red line, whereas if the UK agrees to join up an EU system, then they're less fussed and they're still seem keen to be into Horizon Europe, although the mood music has perhaps made that more difficult and mechanisms might not make that easy going forward. But thank you, that's really useful. And then I thought people might like to see something that's I think a good example of our times. I don't know. I grew up in Gravesend, so obviously International Car Park is a great boon for my hometown. And of course, last year it would be where you park your car before you, if you're lucky enough to go for a nice mini break in a French chateau, you might park your car, get on the Eurostar and head down to Avignon. This year that car park has been a COVID-19 mobile testing station, although they move around and it's been that. But we see now that it's been designated as one of the lorry parks for Brexit. So I think it's very interesting if you look at priorities and the changing nature of the symbolism of a patch of tarmac in Kent as to what the priorities are, and a bit of light relief before we go into 100 days to go.
And yeah, I think looking in the local media, I think there's a lot of consternation that COVID is the priority now. So this is I think the perfect example of the butting of heads of the current problem we're facing at COVID and the looming problem of the end of the transition period. And as Steve said, moving towards 100 days to go. A little comic there, so Diana suggesting I'm not quite ready to order. My lawyers are still studying the menu.
Glad to see they're socially distanced.
Yes, absolutely. So this is a slide we had last week with a couple of edits, just highlighting some of the key points between now and the end of the transition period. So you'll see now we're approaching the 28th of September negotiating round next week. Boris Johnson set the 15th to 16th of October European Council Summit as the deadline for any agreement. but Europe had set the final deadline for agreement as the end of October, because this is the amount of time that's needed to ratify any comprehensive deal in national parliaments. So the next Brexit webinar will be right in the middle of these two, I believe on the October the 22nd, the next Thursday. So it should be quite an interesting time in terms of where we are with negotiations at that point. And as I mentioned, the perfect or ideal scenario for agreeing a deal is that at the end of next week, a draft agreement is produced. Then we have a political endorsement at the European Council summit, and then we get the EU Council and EU Parliament and National Assemblies consent. More likely, perhaps, is there'll be some kind of incomplete agreement, and then a need for a ratification period. Perhaps even more likely is they won't agree anything, will require emergency negotiations throughout October, and then special meetings to bring anything forward. And looking more likely by the day is the potential for no agreement and no deal. But this doesn't rule out some kind of fudge or potential extension, but that's a complete unknown at this stage. So tune into our next webinar in October for the latest update and perspectives.
Tim, I think you've laid that out really clearly, that there's sort of 5 options at the moment. There's still a lack of clarity. It's getting to crunch time, and that is being done in the context, as we can see, of COVID being a significant factor on across Europe. And I'm indebted to Colin, who said he's combining his Brexit meeting with his COVID meeting, and now they call it a Brexit meeting. Perhaps we'll end up with something like that going forward. But I think you can see we're trying to time information to you against things that we need, that you need to be able to operate. And there's not a lot we can do that's moved things forward because we've not got much clarity here. There might be a deal, there might not be a deal. Who knows? But this is the time frames we're working against, and we can update next month with more clarity, we hope.
And speaking of clarity, we thought we'd touch on some of the questions that still remain. So obviously, deal or no deal, we don't know what the answer will be. I think people are getting more pessimistic, but there's still a lot of will to achieve a deal. And we've seen the MHRA regulatory standstill guidance or end of transition guidance, but we're still not certain exactly what the EU might do on this side. So how would goods produced in the UK moving into Europe be regulated? I think previously some exemptions were offered, but these were on specific batches, which would be very difficult. And there's been no moves towards that. So it may be that the EU says you've had enough time to prepare. You should have brought your manufacturing into Europe. We're watching this space. But we are expecting some answers in the terms of upcoming guidance. So I mentioned we'll expect the definition of Northern Ireland qualifying goods and whether this applies to medicines or not. So these are goods that won't need export summary declarations moving from Northern Ireland to Great Britain under the UK Internal Market Bill. Likewise, a little bit more guidance on exactly what unfettered access covers, because there are things like certain health provisions, particularly around things like smoking, that it may not apply to. And we're still waiting for the Northern Ireland Protocol information on highly regulated goods. You'll remember the Northern Ireland Protocol commands paper suggested that this further information would be coming, and obviously medicines are highly regulated goods, so hopefully a little bit more information for our sector.
So Tim, on this one, essentially these are things which either we've seen happen at late notice before a no deal period before, e.g. the EU regulatory standstill guidance came at late notice last year, and we think there might be some, but we don't know. The upcoming UK guidance is stuff that's been promised by the UK government, but they've not put a timetable on, and we still expect it, but we've not been told exactly the dates of it yet.
Absolutely. So, and we will let you know and update our BIA Brexit portal as soon as this information is published.
Thank you.
Staying on the theme of uncertainty, Steve.
Yeah, no, I've started talking a little bit about increasing fog in the Irish Sea, and I thought I'd spend a slide just unpacking a little bit as to what I mean when I talk about increasing fog in the Irish Sea. You've touched on this already, Tim, that under the Northern Ireland Protocol, when that was signed, we said both parties said there would be further detail on how highly regulated goods would be treated. That yet hasn't arrived. So we have uncertainty on how highly regulated goods like medicines, medical devices will be handled under Northern Ireland Protocol. So that's the first bit of uncertainty. We've now got, if you like, the impact of the UK Internal Markets Bill on the free trade agreement negotiations. That's the stuff we talked about at the beginning, whether the process has cleared the pitch, whether the row about international law will have an impact, and that's increasing uncertainty about how that's happening as well. And then some people have talked to me about, well, maybe the way to do this is to supply Northern Ireland. Our commitment to patient means we need to continue to supply Northern Ireland, and we're going to do that by bypassing Great Britain, i.e. England, Scotland and Wales, and going direct into Northern Ireland, either through the Republic of Ireland or direct routes. So I think the challenge here is, if you were able to, and I think this is a theoretical case, able to helicopter your goods straight into Northern Ireland by a direct route from perhaps somewhere in the EU, Holland, say, you had a helicopter that did that. Some of that, I think, still has uncertainty in it about what would be the process of importation of that. Are you going within the EU? Are you exiting the EU? How's that going to be regulated? How will that with the MHRA? So that to me still seems unclear. If you come through the Republic of Ireland, i.e. from a place in France, perhaps across on a ferry to Cork, up through Republic into Northern Ireland, how that works is also, I think, open to question. Again, how does the MHRA informed of that? How is that handled? And all the rest of it if it's a regulated good. And then people talk about the Common Transit Convention, which is in a sense a way in which you can bring a product, bring a box into another country, keep it sealed up, and then move it through into another country. How would that work for Northern Ireland? I think the challenge that we see for people who are doing that is that at the moment, because Northern Ireland is not a very big market, often what happens is a big box is brought into the UK and then is broken down, and bits of that box go to Northern Ireland because it's not a very big market, and there isn't tons of warehousing in Northern Ireland that could keep a very big box. So there's some practical questions about how a common transit convention, even if it was to be organised, would work, and how that works against existing supply routes, and how that works in practice. So again, questions there. We're continually, I'm afraid to say, banged on about packaging and licensing questions, MHRA, EMA, detailed guidance that we need for the sector in this area. And again, we've not had clarity on those things. It's complex because obviously EMA has to operate the EMA process in Northern Ireland, as well as the questions for those of you who are experts on Falsified Medicines Directive and how that will work, how data will work, and how the systems will work. So these are some of the things that I bundle into. The fog in the Irish Sea is not lifting, and in fact is getting denser. But that's just so that you know what I mean, that shorthand. And these are the questions that we are asking in detail on this as we go forward. If you've got questions or thoughts, do please bung them in the chat or in the questions, and we'll try and pick some up as we can at the end. But time now for another question. Just checking in. Are you concerned about the continuing lack of information on how highly regulated products will be dealt with in the Northern Ireland Protocol? It's an issue that I keep raising with ministers. I suppose the question here is, should I keep doing it or not? And if you're less worried, please help me understand that, because this is obviously something I'm maintaining quite a high profile on.
And I think if you've got any specific concerns about supplying Northern Ireland or how that works, or I think specific examples of specific products, let us know, because it would be potentially useful to identify those. And I think every single product will face slightly different challenges, but we may need to turn those into, or ask to turn those into case studies, or speak with government about specific problems over the next few months. So please do get in touch. Again, I think about 3/4 of you have voted. I'll just give it another 5 seconds if there are any late voters. We're closing the poll and sharing the results.
Okay, thank you. Very conclusive there, really helpful. And good to see where you are in relation to your colleagues. If you're not and you've got solutions to this and you can help me with solutions to this, then again I would be keen that people contact me outside this meeting, because maybe you've got solutions we can share with other people. Thank you. Let's keep going.
And moving on specifically onto trader readiness. So we've had a couple of things, both on the 22nd of September. I think the first is a Michael Gove letter to border and logistics professionals, urging them to get ready and suggesting that the biggest potential cause of disruption are traders not being ready for controls implemented by EU member states. This accompanies the publication of the reasonable worst case scenario, which talks about 50 to 70% of large businesses not being ready for the new customs arrangements, and 20 to 40% of small businesses being ready. So 50 to 70% of large businesses ready, 20 to 40% of small businesses ready, and the potential for if this level of readiness is continued, to have a maximum queue of 6,500 to 7,000 heavy goods vehicles in Kent in January. Secondly, on the 22nd of September, George Eustace gave evidence to the DEFRA Select Committee, where he said, we can do all the work in the world to ensure our borders are ready and traders have what they need. But if when they arrive at the other side, it's all a bit disorganized and there's chaos because of a failure of the EU to plan, that's beyond our control. So I think I think these two quotes and these two examples are telling us is that the UK feels, or the UK government feels, it has done everything it can to solve the issue, and that it's now hoping that traders will be ready and that there will be no problems on the EU side. Talking more specifically about readiness, there are a number of different IT systems which are being introduced, particularly smart freight, but these are still being tested and will still be in the test phase on the 1st of January. So whether they will work or not is a bit of a guess. There are specific shortages of things like EU compliant pallets and vets to handle health checks on animal crossings and borders. And obviously the impact of COVID means there's been less stockpiling this time due to less cash flow, and a worry about how COVID might affect the border workforce on the 1st of January with sickness or people self-isolating. And then finally, you may have seen the news yesterday reference to the Kent access permit, the suggestion that Kent is going to have its own border. I think we're still waiting for more exact details on what this will look like, but the idea will be that heavy goods vehicles will need a permit to access Kent, and that this will be policed by the police and by number plate recognition technology. But exactly how that will work and what will happen if people access Kent without a permit, we're still yet to discover.
Well, surely, Tim, I saw that this is already being dubbed the Kermit, and only a Muppet would go into Kent without a Kermit. So we shall see where this one goes, but I think that this is an important aspect. I mean, obviously the government's message to business is check, change, go. I think I am conscious of how much work members in the sector have been doing on this for years and years and years, and how committed we are to making sure that our goods continue to flow. But I think it's important to see the context of this, which is there is a big challenge between the government and the logistics industry. And if I can just remind people from the logistics industry point of view as to sort of where they're at, and you'll remember we flagged this up last month. This was the concerns of the logistics industry last time round. This is at the beginning of September, and it's sort of, I think it's only deepened in the last month. The government offered £80 million worth of support to this sector, not our sector, the logistics sector, to hire 50,000 staff, 3K to help them with recruitment, covering 12K of the first bit of the salary. I think that any of us who've faced the challenge of running a business through COVID times will see that actually to do that amount of recruitment of trained staff in a very short period of time would be difficult. And we see it in test track and trace. And I leave it to your own conclusions as to whether on what track this is going. But I think I raise it with you. If you've got views or you've got insight, I'm keen to learn more. It's not one I've had tons of time to look at, but I think, you know, just raise the challenge with you. But of course, go to the next slide. I think the key things from our perspective is you may have had letters to you if you're a VAT registered business asking you to get ready and make the changes that you need to. My view is you will all have your own logistics providers for your own purposes. I think it's vital that from our sector's perspective, you have an understanding of the readiness of your logistics provider to support you. But the key thing from our sector, and this is really the key point, is the UK government has always promised for category 1 goods, medicines, medical devices, other things, alternative routes to maintain imports and exports. And I remind you of the letter from Steve Oldfield to medicine suppliers from the summer. If you've been following this in detail, you know that we've talked a lot about this, and this is the important paragraph. In 2019, Department of Transport put in place a 4-year procurement framework for freight capacity for category 1 goods, which includes all health supplies. This framework is still in place. DHSC is seeking to secure capacity on the government secured freight capacity to support the health and social care sector. More information will be provided when possible, including updates on procurement timescales and when companies can expect to be able to register and access this service. And I think where I'm at the moment is I will be asking more detail of Steve and others about how do companies access this, as it perceives that, you know, on the other side, some of this may be a logistical challenge with Kermit's 7,000 backed up, 48-hour truck delays, at least for a period of time, as a reasonable worst case scenario now in the public domain. So I think this is in place. It comes with the work we did a couple of years ago. And we don't yet have detail on this, but I think watch this space, and this is where I'll be putting effort in the next month on your behalf. If you don't think that's the right thing for me to do, please tell me, but I think greater clarity and access for our sector to this framework is the thing that I'm going to put effort into for the next period. Tim.
Brilliant. And then keeping on the sector focus, something very important to our sector, the mutual recognition agreement between the UK and the EU. So there's still no agreement. The EU is waiting for, as we said the last webinar, the EU is waiting for movement on other issues, and the MRA is the back of the queue. But we are seeing lobbying from across the EU from the sector, including BV Med, which is the German biomedical association, and they've put out some quite strong words. Steve.
Well, they're in German, Tim, so you better put it all up, because obviously those of us who read German will like to see, and thank you for putting the translation up, but I'll have a crack at the last one here. Dies könnten negative Auswirkungen auf die, my favourite word, Patientenversorgung nach dem Brexit haben. Sorry, apologies to anybody who has any learning in German. But what does that mean, do you think, Tim? Or thank you for doing the translation there on the left-hand side of what they're saying.
So it's obviously talking about the UK becoming a third country under EU law in terms of export to the EU and regulatory processes. And this is what the MHRA standstill guidance refers to in terms of exporting to the EU as well. But what they're basically warning is that for particularly low-priced consumer products, and they highlight syringes, the tariffs and sort of bureaucratic costs would be so expensive that it would be difficult for them to make the business case to export them to Great Britain, which could have wide implications. And then perhaps the largest and most obvious of those is the negative impact on patient care, or Patientenversorgung, to have a go at it as well.
Patientenversorgung, my favourite new word for today, but I mean, it's a serious point, and I think here, if you look at if we're going to need to do significant vaccination programs next year, which I'd hope we would be able to do on COVID, it's all the various parts that are needed, and this is important to understand. And I think this is one of the reasons why we keep pushing for there being an MRA, as do colleagues and industry associations across Europe.
Then moving on, staying on the sector focus, so I think sort of the priorities for the life science sector after Brexit, sorry, not breakfast.
Yeah, after breakfast.
Breakfast as well. Yeah.
Lunch and dinner, we stay focused on these. So yeah, I mean,
go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Yeah, so I think the Prime Minister is committed to our sector, and we continue to step up to the challenge. I think we are an industry of the future. We're able to get private sector investment into innovative UK businesses. Obviously, the comprehensive spending review is a key focus, and we will look to see whether the news today means that has changed its schedule. Obviously, the Chancellor's making a statement later today about emergency support for the economy. I don't know what that quite means to the CSR yet, but we are active in making sure that the sector's views are represented in that discussion, one of which, of course, is to make sure that the MHRA is supported to be able to do innovation, run its new regulatory processes, and run and support simplification and ratification agendas where they're needed. And those of you who were at our joint conference with the MHRA last week will have a good understanding of where the ambitious agenda for the agency there we're supporting. We're also working on the finance agenda, the support for world-class R&D and the improvements in the R&D budget, and particularly medicines manufacturing, and making sure the UK is a world-leading drug development and launch market. So at the same time as we're talking about Brexit, we're also making sure that we are participating and hopefully being a strong voice in making sure our sector can be very successful come what may through these coming months, with our eyes on the big term prize and making our case there. So just a slight thing for those of you who don't follow the detail. If there's lots more going on from the VIA other than Brexit if you just follow this, but this is sort of the core narrative of our sector which we're pursuing, and I think we can be very confident too.
Absolutely. So that's bringing us towards the end. So just to remind people that I think some links to key documents and other materials that we've spoken about on this webinar are available at the top of the BIA Brexit.org webpage, including the letter from HMRC to VAT registered businesses. And we have a number of key events coming up that you may want to sign up for, including UK Bioscience Forum, which is in mid-October, just before the EU Council meeting. And then even bigger, our annual Bioprocess UK conference, which is at the beginning of December.
Yeah, no, I think it would be a fantastic insight into how large parts of the supply chain for the COVID vaccines and therapeutics are being made. Some really interesting developments in this community, and some great new pitches from innovators to the audience. Check it out and have a look. Lots of else things going on. I'm keen, if we've got a couple of minutes before the top of the hour, to take any questions or comments from people. And I see Nick has asked, has there been any progress on an MRA with Switzerland and Israel? I can't remember that one, Tim. I've not followed it.
My understanding is I think this was mentioned, I think, in the MHRA standstill guidance, and that we will have MRAs in place with both Switzerland and Israel. And also, having seen in the news that we will have a financial services MRA with Switzerland. So I think they will be in place. It's just the EU member states that question mark still lies around.
Okay, maybe we can drag out the detail of that if we can find it for next time round. For those of you who are after the slides, we try and make these available to BIA members, and contact Tim if you're interested in that. And also, if you're a BIA member, the ballot for the board is open. We're a not-for-profit, member-owned and member-run, and thank lots of members. 16 members have put themselves forward for election to our board. If you are members, please look out for the communication from Nick Gardner, enabling you to cast your vote, and please do look at that and cast your ballot in the next period of time. Seb's asked around MHRA mentioned guidance about the US. Is that related to Orbis?
I've got to admit, I'm not familiar with an MHRA mention of guidance specific to the US, but thanks for flagging that. We'll see if we can find out more and either get an answer to you or put more information on that in our next webinar.
So Seb, I think I'll ask Christiane to come back to you on the specifics of that point. I don't think your question is off beam. I think it's a very sensible question. Okay, I'm conscious of time. I hope that has been of use to you. Thank you very much for coming. Do drop us any points, guidance, questions, or others. Thank you for coming, and we'll look forward to updating you further next month.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. Looking forward to the next one.
Thanks, Tim.